Welcome to the channel. My name's Stu and this is a story about returning to play electric guitar after putting it down nearly 40 years ago and the lessons learned to get up to speed with the many changes in the music industry when looking to purchase guitars, amps and pedals. So do check out the previous videos, which is the introduction to my journey. So if you've been following my return to music, in my last video I talked about the need to have a practice routine that would help me to tighten up my timing, broaden my understanding of the fretboard and learning to play in the pocket of a given track. And I also made mention of the use regarding a physical metronome and those nifty little guitar amplifiers that you can plug in and pretty much play anywhere without disturbing anyone around you. So as my journey continues, and I'm sure that you may have found this or are finding this, so of course does your ear for tone and the search for equipment or even software that will resonate with you. And as I mentioned previously, returning to playing guitar, I started at a point in 2019 that was a foot in the musical door. Not sure where I was going, and I purchased an off-the-shelf Fender Stratocaster, a 2019 American Pro version 1. So do check out that video if you want to know more about that and that particular model. But as time passed, my ear developed and my affection for guitar increased. And I knew I just wanted to draw closer to an instrument that would feel more a part of me. Now, when it comes to recording, I might use a guitar that I'd not normally gel with, but because of the instrument's playability, its tonal qualities, and in general, a good guitar for studio work, then I'll use that. But when it comes to just enjoying the moment, being at one with an instrument that inspires you to play, and even better, to write material for a song or a theme track, I needed to look again at my all-time favourite guitar, the Stratocaster. Now, perhaps for someone starting out, you may not have that feeling just yet. Some folks start out buying a guitar that generally resembles something a favourite guitar player that they love listening to uses. But for those of us who are much older, and I wonder, how much does your past have a bearing on what you play now? And it would be good if you could comment below, and I think that would be interesting to hear other views on that. Now, speaking of the past, I purchased a book on the history of Fender Stratocasters, which is not only a good read for anyone that's interested in these iconic guitars, but it's got so many really nice quality photographs to enjoy. And the history is fascinating. And you know, it's so ironic that in the late 1940s, early 50s, a man by the name of Leo Fender would go on to design two of the world's most long-lasting instruments that have arguably never really been improved upon. Yes, given little tweaks, but pretty much from the get-go, he had a winning design, and yet the guy didn't even play guitar. I mean, that's really quite something. Now, I began playing guitar around 1974, and Fender and Gibson would soon be names that I'd become familiar with. And in a very short time, I had an understanding that Fender guitars manufactured prior to the CBS buyout of Fender Instruments in January of 1965, those were the most sought-after instruments by my peers in my local guitar community. Now, prices for 1950s and 60s Strats were not as crazy as they are now, but they were still well out of the reach for a young lad still at high school, earning a few pounds a weekend in a local restaurant. And that's where my story is going. Looking through the Fender book, I recognised the connection I had to the past, call it tradition, history, whatever. And I remember when I had just turned 9 years of age, my parents dropped my much older sister off at the famous Isle of Wight Rock Festival in 1970, where Jimi Hendrix would make one of his last appearances that year. The farmland used was actually owned by a friend of my uncle, who also had a farm on the island. But anyway, that's another story. As if to help me make a decision, a close family member, one who had been very supportive during my struggle as a young musician, opened a door of opportunity. And so I searched the internet and saw the guitar that spoke to me. A modern 2022 build custom shop Stratocaster modelled on the 1950s designs, but it was not just modelled on that period, it was made to look as though it had the kind of wear and tear you'd expect from an old, well-used guitar, even down to the tarnishing of the various metal parts. And the effect today is known as relicking, and despite it being one of the best-selling guitar finish styles around, it has both people who hate them and of course those who love them. And when I opened the case, I knew right away this was home for me. So there are many questions that can surround the purchase of such a controversial guitar finish. For example, why a Relic guitar? Why would anyone want to buy an expensive instrument that looks like it's been dragged along a concrete floor? Well, number one, why not purchase a vintage original, perhaps one that was already beat up, which might be a little bit cheaper to purchase? Or number two, why not purchase a cheaper guitar and mess it up myself? Save a lot of money. Okay, well, let's look at this. Now, I'm absolutely sure many will have their own answers to those questions, so do comment below, but do be nice, be respectful. So as usual, I did my internet research and I read comments like, people who buy Relic guitars are just playing at it. They are posers and kidding themselves. I'm not sure I understand those comments. Are there people who actually try to pass off a Relic guitar as something they have worn out themselves by supposedly playing hundreds of gigs over years of performing? Perhaps. I don't know. And if you're one of those folks, perhaps you could comment below, because I can't answer that kind of question. Another popular comment is, would you go and buy a brand new car with scratches and dents on it? Well, the answer is no, but it's not a good comparison. In days gone by, I used to be involved with custom cars and motorcycles, and I remember a phase where vehicles were finished off to look rusty as though they had been through an apocalypse. And that was an expensive process. And of course, that was an art form. I recently completed a TV series on model railways, and we built a layout and purchased brand new track, engines and buildings. The locomotives, they looked aged, which was done by skillful spray work. And the track would be sprayed rust colour and weeds planted to give a more authentic feel. Now, I just mentioned some of these things. Of course, they're a very different subject. But at the end of the day, it makes perfect sense to me as an old guitar player to want to purchase a modern build guitar that is based on something created in the 50s or 60s, which plays flawlessly, yet looks as though it's from that era, and having that pristine finish would feel a little unusual. Let me explain. So first of all, why a Relic finish guitar for me? Well, to give you context, my first Stratocaster in 1975, a good Japanese copy, started out in life in a gloss black polyurethane finish. But I soon began to hate that finish as it kind of looked like a toy. And so I sanded the shine off, something some guitarists do today actually to that kind of finish. And a bit later, I painted the body with enamel paints for a psychedelic look, a pretty common thing that many people did in the late 60s, early 70s. And in fact, you can actually purchase a copy of Beatles guitarist George Harrison, who painted his Fender Strat with various colours, and of course Jimi Hendrix, whereby you can purchase a copy of a Gibson Flying V he used briefly. But I soon began to hate that finish. I stripped the guitar down to the wood and had it professionally finished in a cellulose, in an off-white. And because the coat was very thin, it actually began to wear quite quickly, especially because at that time, our band was both, it was a bit of a throwback to the Woodstock era and a blend of the new rage for punk rock. So the clothes we wore, everything from, cavalry style jackets, hanging jewelry, dozens of wrist bangles and rings or studded wristbands, chains, and of course, heavy belt buckles, they all took a toll on the guitar's finish. So on top of that, I actually used to sweat profusely. And interestingly, I heard a story that Irish guitarist Rory Gallagher also had something in his sweat that promoted further finish damage to his already damaged Stratocaster. Now, as the band I was in changed its image again, I rebuilt the Strat out of various custom parts and finished it in a deep wood varnish, only to set the guitar on fire by placing it on a Thunder Flash pod at a concert. And in due course, it was scrapped. So guitars I owned were either kept in first-class condition, usually because they didn't gel with me, and I probably never used them on stage, and I wanted to get a good resale on them. Or a guitar was a tool to be used and refinished if necessary to suit the stage presence. I remember one time buying a shop-soiled Ibanez Destroyer, one of the first ones, which was a really gaudy metallic colour, and it had a bad chip on the finish. So I got a good bit knocked off the price. Little did the shop know, as soon as I had it home, I stripped the finish off, stained the wood, and gave it a Carina Woodlook lacquer finish. Again, it was about the guitar suiting the style of band that we were at that time. So, context. My point is, for some of us, guitars could be simply a beautiful product to admire, or a tool that was to be used to bring forth whatever message you were wanting to bring forth. I never personally met anyone who made their guitar to look relicked. I don't even know if that was a word back then. I mean, within the community of bands I was around, and that were kind of mainly teenagers or young in the 20s. So I don't think anyone thought they were trying to pass themselves off as old hands with hundreds of performances under their belt. Guitars did get beat up. They got repainted, some done professionally, others done with a brush or whatever household paint was lying around. And sure, there were folks who looked after the guitars meticulously, while for others, when a guitar became your go-to instrument, it usually ended up getting well used. And again, another popular thing many folks, including myself, were guilty of was to jam your cigarette butt up there by the headstock. And often you would forget that your cigarette was there. And of course, the headstock got burn marks. Again, I'm not sure that I ever knew anyone who set out to do those things deliberately. It just happened. And it wasn't just guitar players and their guitars. Folks painted designs, good or bad, on their drum kits, keyboards, guitar cabinets, and many other things. So for me, this Stratocaster, in its somewhat very conservative relic finish, looks like something that I would have owned, and it feels very comfortable. It's like an old jumper, nice and cozy. And it's why someone like me at my age feels a connection with a product from the past. So why not buy an old beat-up vintage Fender? And that's a reasonable question, and it did pass through my mind. But I remember well in my younger days that some of those guitars were not that great. So, great care would need to be taken for many reasons before putting a lot of money down on such an old genuine instrument. And in my opinion, looking at today's vintage guitar marketplace, they are often far too expensive. Professional investing in old things is another conversation altogether. But for me, this modern build, limited edition Relic Strat is beautifully finished. It plays very well, excellent setup, and mimics the best design elements from the 50s period, but introduces modern features that are acceptable to me, such as the 9.5 radius fingerboard. I do prefer this. The larger frets, a 5-blade switch. As a so-called out-of-face musician user, I hated the 3-blade switches. It was always a pain balancing that. They've used the later 11 screws on the single-ply pickguard. Now, that alleviates problems with buckling to the single-ply. The paint lacquer is of a modern composition, so it's more stable as compared to some of the old finishes that faded away, and very badly in some cases. In particular, they had real problems in the beginning with the red in the 3-tone sunburst. The red would actually disappear. As for the actual wear and tear, well, this has been really well done, and clearly it took a lot of skill and know-how. As mentioned earlier, I understand this. I did work as a coach builder doing custom paintwork, and without doubt, from memory, this is an authentic representation of how a guitar can wear. And of course, the metal tarnishing is also very good. I remember an old Gibson SG I owned, the plating not only tarnished, but began peeling off. And no, I didn't help it along the way. The only thing that looks somewhat overdone to me is probably the wear on the back of the neck. It looks a little bit too uniform for me personally. I've never had a guitar that looked anything like this. However, what I will say is it's fabulous to play, so I'm very happy with it. So while I was filming this episode, a friend of mine dropped round this beautiful Stratocaster. This has been roasted. Again, you see this on the back of the neck here. You got hand-wound Texas specials in this guitar. Yeah, nice guitar. Another Relic, and in this case a heavy Relic. Nice. I have another one here. This is a late 64, and this is not a heavy Relic, although it is a wee bit more beaten up. You can see that. This has got hand-wound Fat 60 pickups. Again, that classic worn neck at the back there, rosewood board. This is a really, really nice guitar to play actually, and these Fat 60s are very nice. There you go, another Relic Stratocaster. At the end of the day, Fender Relic or Gibson Murphy Lab finished guitars will resonate differently with each owner. For some, it brings back pleasant memories of days gone by, and for others, it's an artistic aesthetic that just appeals. Now, I own guitars that are in mint condition, and I do my very best to keep them that way. They look lovely, but my favourite guitars to play are the Relic ones. Just as an aside, and I'm sure you all know the feeling of taking delivery of your guitar and admiring that beautiful finish only to put a ding or a scratch on it days later. That little blemish is so disheartening, and of course, it just reduced the resale value. Ironically, I don't actually care if I get a ding or a scratch on my Relic guitars. In fact, I'm not even sure if I'd notice any additional blemishes added by myself. And neither would it devalue the guitar. As for folks who make videos of cheap guitars being trashed by dragging them down the road behind their car or whatever, apart from being just clickbait or perhaps someone just having a bit of fun. As someone who used to refinish or customize guitars, there was a reason for it. It was part of the stage performance, particularly when we had a very theatrical theme, or guitars just got wear and tear through use. But I personally would not buy a guitar and then go ahead and deliberately relic it. For example, this is a Gibson Les Paul Special Double Cut. It's a 60s VOS model, which stands for Vintage Original Spec, mimicking a vintage model from the 60s era. The finish has been faded, but it's still pretty flawless. There is slight tarnish on the metalwork, but it's modelled on an old guitar that's been kept in a case all its life, so to speak. Similar to the kind of Time Machine custom shop Fender guitars. However, because it has a very thin lacquer, this will wear very easily with a lot of use. For me, part of the professional Relic purchase is that a team of recognised luthiers have come together to create a particular limited edition custom build guitar. This is registered as such and will then go on to hold a given value as an authentic Relic model. If you do this yourself to a guitar, and no matter how well you do it, generally speaking, your guitar has already lost value as soon as you purchase it. But the moment you actually put any marks on it, the value will drop further. But maybe for you, that's okay. There are folks who do relic their guitars, particularly guitars that tend to lend themselves to that finish. And of course, that's a personal choice and part of the fun of guitar ownership. But as I say, possibly a bit of a risk, as it will likely devalue that particular instrument. Feel free to comment below, but please, keep it responsible, be respectful of others. Always interesting to hear what others have to say about that, or your own story. In the next video, talking of unintentional finish damage, stay tuned for my Firebird story. If you like the content, then subscribing and hitting the usual buttons are much appreciated. And please do ask any questions you think that I might be able to help you with. Until next time, the journey continues. Take care.